Hello guys, Luis from Ketogains here, and today we're going to have for interview Alessandro Ferretti. Hello Alessandro, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well. Nice to be here, guys.
Thank you for coming with us. Alessandro, why do you introduce yourself and explain a little bit of your research?
Sure. First of all, I wanted to thank you guys for all the great work that you keep doing. Avid followers of that. My name is Alex, or Alessandro, whatever. And in recent years, I've been focusing primarily on research, more to do with metabolism, inflammation, so including heart rate variability, blood glucose. But I qualified as a nutritionist in a supposedly scientific-based college in the UK, which is where I live.
Incredible. So Alessandro has been doing a lot of research in metabolism and also on low-carb diets. And from recent chats with him, I found intriguing some questions I've had on myself that didn't really make that much sense. And I haven't not really found the actual answer. But Alessandro has some incredible theories that, as well, many other researchers have come to the same conclusions. Again, these are theories. There is no conclusive paper on this. But the idea or the theory is that we've seen some people that have been on low-carb diets and keto for a long while that I'm going to also explain my case that we actually need a little bit less calories than what theoretically we would need. For example, if we were doing a high-carb diet, normally, if we were to do any calculation using any method, catch my cardinal or any other formula to estimate our caloric needs, and even then, if we were to actually test by ourselves, depending on how we felt and what we need, we would be using, for example, in my case, 2,000 calories just for maintenance, then adding up for exercise and more, let's say 2,400 or so. And this is normally what people think, that they need a lot of calories to perform correctly. And then when they try to cut back, when they try to lose weight, they end up, for example, like in my case, like 1,800 or even just 2,000, because, you know, they are accounting for exercise, but they don't lose weight. What I found in my case is, when I want to cut or when I want to maintain, for example, my maintenance calories, instead of the 2,000 would be about 1,700. And then if I wanted to cut, I would have to be eating between 1,400 or so, or even less. And this, again, happens to a lot of people that I've talked to and to a lot of our clients while they do a keto diet. And the longer they've been doing a ketogenic diet, of course, a well-formulated ketogenic diet. So this brings the question that some people think that this is a metabolic downregulation. Then they are experiencing likely what we call a metabolic syndrome, or, they can eat less. So what do you have to say about this, Alessandro?
Wow, you're right. I think that there are a few things that we considered, and they are very much in line with some of the concerns that you just mentioned, or some of the points that you just mentioned. So there are mainly two ways of trying to, so caloric estimation is really, really hard. First of all, the caloric estimation is based on caloric value of food. So this is food that is burned in a calorimeter that would estimate a certain amount of heat, and converting in a reasonably linear manner the calories into energy. Scientists have estimated that a certain mass of food will give you a certain energetic value. Now, as you are very well aware, mitochondria don't just generate heat. They also generate, protons and condense into ATP, and they generate free radicals. So depending upon how the system is actually working, sometimes the mitochondria will make more heat and less energy, or more energy and less heat. So already at the start, we might have a few little hiccups in trying to correctly estimate the caloric requirements for someone using calories rather than using energetic estimation of a different form. So in an ideal world, we would love to measure how much ATP is actually generated given a certain amount of food and the type of food. That will be perhaps a little bit more precise way of looking at it. So indirect calorimetry already has a little few concerns in caloric value estimation. In fact, I refer in patient, I prefer to use the food mass, trying to measure and estimate their metabolic efficiency, so how well they actually produce energy, and refer by weight of food. Now, given that, there are mainly two models, and this was actually brought to my attention quite some time ago by Dr. Tommy Wood, which helped us out in challenging our theories. So I asked his opinion to try to find faults in our theories, and it's been, a great help, as you can imagine. And one of the things that was quite interesting is that there are mainly two systems. One is the additive model. So you have a certain amount of baseline that your body needs to stay alive. Okay, so that will be your basal metabolic rate. X amount of calories every day you need in order to maintain your body physically alive, not active or anything else. And anything on top is basically added. So if you then go for a training session, the calories that you burn in the training session will have to be added to that. So baseline 2,000 calories, you go to a training that you spend 500 calories, total caloric value estimate is 2,500 calories. The other model is the constraint model, where there is a cap, and the body will adapt the energy efficiency to try to get more energy given a certain amount. So we can increase the caloric intake, energetic intake, but there is a limit on how much we add. And this was observed quite some time ago now, especially in athletes, in long distance athletes, because if you use an additive model, they shouldn't be alive. So if they consume, for example, if they spend 2,000 calories given height and weight and metabolism, and then they do a very long endurance event with a few thousand calories, but the food that they take in during this event is nowhere near that amount, theoretically they should vanish. They should start to break down tissues and eventually perish. But this does not happen. Hence the second theory, which is the constraint model. So the body starts to become more and more efficient in releasing and making energy, but also conserving that. So only in very specific cases where disease states actually set in, there was a metabolic reduction, but is actually not very common. This is given our subset population which we tested, which were healthy individuals, not affected by any disease, not taking medication, from age between 25 and 50, I seem to remember. But, the typical subset of population. So these are the first two things that we need to kind of look into when starting to make energetic estimation. Following a low carbohydrate and or ketogenic diet, and I'm making this distinction because for some people, low carb does not actually equal ketogenic diet, as you are well aware. If they were in somewhat metabolically not as efficient, through that transition, the diet or the nutritional protocol as such, as low carbohydrate, high fat and ketogenic diet, increases potentially that efficiency. Therefore, the total amount of energy that they require from food might be less. And it's really interesting that the numbers you mentioned on top of your head are exactly what we have observed in people making that transition, which is around 15%.
Okay.
So if someone is consuming primarily carbs as a form of energy, and their glucose level is within normal parameters, whatever normal that may be, and then they go on to a low carbohydrate, high fat diet or a ketogenic diet even more, generally we have observed that if they maintain the same caloric value, they are in excess of around 15% according to our calculation. And when I say ours, is me and Waco Jaros, the engineer behind all the calculations and the models and the creation of the models. So you are absolutely right. And this happens in an adaptation manner. And I'm just really careful in using that word because we have an influx of people. Are you keto adapted? Well, what that means to me is, has your body learned how to burn fat at higher proportion than before? Unfortunately, there hasn't been a scientific quantification in percentages of glucose versus fats that we need, or glucose or glycogen versus fat, to declare someone that is fat adapted or keto adapted. So you can see that we have so many things that are kind of undefined, and yet we are trying to pin down and zoom in with very precise definitions.
Yes.
And is a challenge in itself.
Exactly. And this is also, it's just part of the puzzle. Because, a lot of people say that calories don't count, and especially that they don't count on ketogenic diets. So what we see normally is that people that come into keto due to thinking they are, in a way, going to be free of having to be, calculating calories and macros. And usually the response is, okay, I've not really counted anything, and I'm losing weight. Or there are some others that say, okay, yes, I am indeed counting, and I'm eating 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 calories, and I'm actually losing weight. So I'm gonna say again a theory, and you can correct me if I blab about something that it's totally incorrect.
Yeah, I'll try if I know that is.
Okay, so what I've read and from research is that talking about, again, metabolic inefficiency, when you are not adapted and come from a typical high carb diet and you transition to keto, your body is not really primed, especially at cellular level, as to use all this new fat as energy. For example, your enzymes are not ready to be able to digest so much fat. So probably you waste some of it via digestion, you excrete it. Yeah. Some other is lost as heat because your mitochondria cannot utilize all this energy. Again, they're not ready. So probably you are eating, again, 4,000, 5,000 calories, and you're burning it all. You're very inefficient. However, as we said before, once you pass certain time when you've been doing the diet diligently, even more so probably if you exercise, your mitochondria starts to learn how to harness the power of the fatty acids better. And then that would be probably around the time that some scientists like Bolek and Finney say you become keto adapted. Basically, when you are not really so hungry, when you realize you don't have to fuel all the time, when you start getting your energy back when training. Yeah. And then, as you said before, our body really does not use calories. It uses ATP, right? So do you know how many molecules of ATP are generated from fat versus carbohydrates?
Yeah, I mean, I can direct you to our mito calculator, where you have different length of chains of fats giving you a certain amount of ATP, assuming also going through the calculation of obviously loss. So we're talking net ATP. So if you take, for example, a 6-carbon chain or a very short chain fatty acid versus a glucose molecule or 3 of them to make up the same number of carbons, then you will see that the ATP generated by the fatty acid will be much higher given the comparative carbon number. So if we compare like for like on carbon number, this sounds very overly simplistic, and it is. So there are other losses, there are all sorts of things. So to answer to your question, I can send you a link. If you go to Mito Calculator,
okay.
Depending upon the length of the chains of the fat, we will generate more ATP or less ATP. Some of them need to be transported. Some others can enter the cells much quicker without the need of targeting precisely. So CPT 1 and 2 may not be called into play, and the CAT. So, but however, there is a net increase within the efficiency, getting the same amount of the same carbon number, given a certain amount of time that we actually need in order to burn that efficiently. So, and I think you nail it on the head, because the mitochondrial efficiency is exceptionally important. And depending upon also the type of effort that is required, then we can choose, the body has to choose and select the appropriate fuel. Having said that, in our latest paper that is just being in the process of being published right now, it should be published in the next month or so, we took athletes and trained athletes, and put them on a ketogenic diet for 6 weeks, which is what I push for, rather than the usual 4 weeks. Otherwise, people would measure the transition rather than the actual adaptation performance precisely. And in high intensity, in a GTX kind of graded performance and incline and treadmill, we were all expecting obviously a detrimental effect of the adoption of a ketogenic diet, because they go into the very high end of anaerobic. And maybe because their mitochondrial efficiency was good, maybe, we don't know. I have lots of questions about it. We were all stunned where we recorded a non-drop in performance after 6 weeks on a strict ketogenic diet in HIIT type of training. Now, if you were to ask me what the result might have been, as my assumption would have been, there would have been a drop within the performance. And interestingly, also to see the deviations in between the different individuals. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that it highly depends about how efficiently a mitochondria can generate energy, and how trained that mitochondria and that system is in order to utilize one type of fuel or another. And this is where I would introduce a concept called molecular crowding. So I take the example of people going on holiday. Depending upon their destination, they choose how to pack their bags, their luggage. So if you tell them that you're going to go into like a winter location, they will pack accordingly. So if people have been using, for example, carbohydrate, the cell is geared up to burn that as a type of fuel, to store a bit more of that. So when you swap the food proportions, the substrate proportions, cells need time to adjust enzymatically in order to account for that efficiency that they want to maintain energy at a certain level. So that is what we believe is part of the adaptation process, is that crowding that has to swap, going from mainly using glucose to also include a good high, low, whatever proportions of fat. And that is what I think is the adaptation process. Once again, I'm using that word very carefully.
Yes. So this also probably, it's part of the metabolic flexibility that some high-end athletes are looking for, right? Like, for
Correct.
example, for someone who is just a weekend warrior or just does exercise, recreatively, I don't think this matters that much. To explain to our audience, most people who do keto for fat loss really don't need to worry about this, because I've also had questions of some people thinking that, okay, their metabolism is going to slow down, right? Because they're doing keto. We already addressed that it's really not slowing down, so it's more so becoming more efficient. The people ask, okay, what happens when or if I switch back to high carbs? I'm going to gain a lot of weight more easily, because now I'm getting all this energy that my body will now store. My idea would be that just as you required adaptation time to use energy from fats, then likely, I may be wrong, you will require a little bit of time to also adapt to using the carbs as fuel. Now, it's not that you're not becoming flexible, it's just that depending on the type of diet you have been doing, you need, as you said, time to adapt.
Yeah.
If you're an athlete, maybe you can just jump straight into keto, do keto adapt, and then eventually start introducing carbs as well, like, on a targeted ketogenic diet. Yeah. You have that flexibility all the time, so you can use both energy substrates accordingly. Because this is also a question I was meant to ask you. We know that glucose is faster in terms of energy production. Yeah. When you adapt to keto, you become more efficient, but not necessarily faster at using fat as fuel. Correct. So theoretically, and I think in practice as well, using carbs strategically around training while still maintaining fat adaptation would be the optimal protocol, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I tend to imagine that like a scale. Okay. So there are people that are mainly on one and other people that are mainly on the other. So depending upon the sport, we tend to use keto style diet in a periodization manner. And that has been found to be really, really efficient in training the body to get more out of less, exactly as you just said. So if someone trains at the gym or has a constant load or a certain specific type of training which doesn't really change much, then the person has a little bit more flexibility. But in a sport at competitive elite level, obviously what really matters is the performance. It doesn't matter what they burn, but is the performance. So we have observed that people purely keto, some of them will decrease their performance very sharply after quite a few months. We can make all sorts of assumptions about it, but I'll refrain from that. Whereas others is like, best thing ever happened to them. So there is an individual aspect which I believe is very important. We can look at, for example, certain genetic testing companies that can provide some rough guidance on that. Some of them are a bit more conservative, some other are a little bit more open. Just careful what you read. Yeah. So I did some work with a company called DNA Fit. They measure 3 or 4 genes on one and 6 or 7 on the other. You can have a rough idea on which directions you might be more inclined to actually perform better. And also the sport will dictate what, because even in our study, we took people on a gradient inclining every minute of, X percentage, but does that relate to a real sport? And the word is no, it doesn't. Yeah. Because you just don't know. Because there's HIT, I practice a sport that is HIT, but instead of having a treadmill that inclines that every minute, I have people coming towards me wanting to beat me up. So in a sparring situation, the energy system I use are primarily not really involved in keto. So I need that very specific reactivity of creatine phosphates in the glycolytic pathway be always ready. And what I found, similar to many other research I had found, is that for that type of type 2B, high speed, not necessarily strength type of effort, keto might have, over a certain amount of time at a period, some strong limitations. However, others actually still did very, very well. So the deviation from the mean can be quite substantial. And this is where I ask people to look at individual level, what is actually best for them, for their specific practice, for their makeup and genetic makeup. Because we are all based on means and p-values and confidence interval, yet the people that we have in front often are not the mean.
Yes.
And you know, we can stay there and try to fit in and actually look at the studies and say, look, this study has shown, yes, but the person does not function well. So this is where I think there are some strong individual variations, and this is where your point, it was actually great. Some people reach a certain metabolic efficiency and they need less. However, one thing that we have noticed is the chronic overconsumption of calorie. I'm saying calories because this is the word that these people use. Calories don't matter. Actually, over a certain threshold in a prolonged manner, it does.
Yes. Yeah, we've seen as well in some of these popular experiments, N1 experiments, where you have this a person or an individual who is supposedly eating 5,000 calories for 4 weeks, and the person really didn't gain weight, for example. Of course, they gain probably 1 or 2 pounds, but they either don't declare it or they just dismiss it entirely. Like they say, oh, if I were to have done this on high carb, I would probably gain like 5 or 10 or whatever, right? But they never really don't do it more than 6 weeks or so. Like if you were, like we were theorizing, if you were to do this exactly the same experiment for, let's say, do it for 2 months at least or more, probably you would start gaining weight, not likely at the normal level as if you were doing a high carb diet, but you will still gain weight. And this is again is why we see some people that don't really care about calories. They lose some weight for a while, but then they stall and they cannot lose any more weight if they don't start to count calories, right?
Yeah, and when I investigated that a little bit further, I wanted to assess what do they actually meant by I can eat what I want, because that interpretation can be of twofold. The first one is they can eat as much as they want,
but they don't want more.
Precisely my point. The second one is actually this satiety feeling actually sets in. In some people, one of the greatest advantages is the satiety. I just had now an athlete at Olympic level, and she just can't eat anymore because it doesn't feel right to her. And I said, well, guess what? Don't. You know, your training is going well, all the numbers are in, you are in a loading phase with periodized low carbohydrate, high fat diet. Let's see what happens when we introduce correctly and timely the carbs and actually see what happens.
Exactly.
So, and that's really, really important because she's not condemned onto eating like that. It's just that obviously for her sport, carbs may not play such a major role overall. But if there is a hill and a strength, she has to be able to respond.
Exactly.
And if she has a downregulation of GLUT4 on the cells, meaning the cell is not as used to in burning carbs, there will be a decrease in performance.
You mentioned before also the difference between eating whole foods versus eating more so processed foods. So, on people who are like, and this is something we've also seen with our clients, it's incredible that our protocol has a lot of emphasis on eating whole foods, very much like it would be like a keto paleo diet, in the way that we are not, of course, against that if you want to use or ingest artificial sweeteners in moderation, of course, or want to drink Diet Coke or whatever. Okay, it's a choice. They don't do anything to you. Keep on using them. They may be even a great tool for people who are trying to lose weight or caught for a contest or so. But again, like 90% or most of your actual food should be whole, green vegetables, especially high quality products from farms, eggs, meats, etc. And what we've seen is, we were talking before about metabolic efficiency and people having to eat less to maintain or even perform great. Yeah. But now what we see is that, you have to eat less, but people actually want to eat less when they follow this protocol of whole foods. They don't need to eat as much. And basically one of the biggest complaints, if we say it so, from some of our clients is that they say that it's so much food. They can eat so much food, like they don't want to eat that much protein. And I'm saying much protein, and I'm saying probably 90 grams for a female of actual the protein macro. So it's really not that much in the way of calories, and not that much in the way of macros. Yeah. If you were to place the food on a table, of course, food volume would be a lot because it's not processed. Yeah. For us, that's a victory to have a client to say, I don't want to eat much. I don't want to eat that much, versus the client that says that they are always hungry and they're not losing weight. But calorically-wise, they are eating less calories than even they were calculated on any calculator, like we said at the beginning. But volume-wise, it's a lot of food. So basically what you said before, that volume-wise, and that you place more value in the actual volume of the food than the actual calories.
Correct. And this is where, Marty Kendall's work has been fantastic, because he's really woken up people to nutrient density and macro proportions. And, you have, Ted Naiman, all of these people that, you know very well, that have done great work in bringing people, bringing awareness to people and made them understand that as per any diet, you can have a healthy version and an unhealthy version. So when you are comparing two things, just make sure that you compare the same kind. So to me, the starting point is always a vegetable variety in order to look at microbiome. That, in a way, saved me for perhaps assumption developing celiac or doing all sort of having all sorts of problems as I had. And can I pinpoint that due to a very good functioning bowel microbiome, diversity, and etc., now I am as healthy as I have ever been, ever in my life? No, it's an assumption, but it's strange that now research is starting to point in that way. So I think personally is remarkably important. And then we add the protein. We estimate the carbs in relation to sport activity or lack of, and then the rest is fat. Where fat, as we know from our group, fat is the liver, as my Julian mentioned quite so many times. Fat is the liver. Fat is what you tend to adjust it. And what was really interesting is that if in an athlete that is healthy, we see an accumulation of beta-hydroxybutyrate in blood, we actually see that as a downside, unless it's straight after a long ride, fasted training session, perhaps with some fat and coffee beforehand. We see that as potentially as metabolic inefficiency.
Yeah, that also basically relates to a lot of what we have been experiencing. When we've had people that have been doing keto for a long time, my case, Tyler, Mike, etc. And we measure our ketone levels on the blood, because basically if we use a breathalyzer, I've just I got the newest Ketogenics, and I was really like, what the hell? I'm not even measuring like low levels on Ketogenics. Maybe it's broken, the device. Right. I've used acetone and it works perfectly. And of course, on P6, I've never really measured anything. No. Yeah. The only way for me to measure is with blood. And then normally, for most of the times, I'll always measure just barely in ketosis, like 0.5, 0.8,
Yeah.
that would be
Yeah.
my norm.
Yeah.
Only if I eat a lot of fat, or if I use exogenous ketones, or if I train very heavy and just immediately, do I have a higher levels.
Yeah, correct. That is in total line with what we have observed as well. So the longer the athlete has been on a certain periodization for ketogenic diet or low carbohydrate, high fat, and is sub 120 grams of as an indication, yeah, not 119, 121. So, you know, it's just an estimate, yeah. In training days, and 50 to 70 in non-training day resting, unless the person is inflamed, in which case they need to up the carbs a little bit more. Normally between 0.5 to 0.7 millimolar.
Yeah.
And, you know, Waker now looked at quite in a bit of depth in the NAD plus and NADH pump, and in some people we're trying to modify that approach and you know, making sure that is functioning correctly, and that can steer more acetone or more beta hydroxybutyrate depending upon the you know, the supplementation and the type of effort. But if we see someone that at rest, there's already been on a certain nutritional protocol for quite some time, on a low carbohydrate, high fat diet or ketogenic diet, and there is an accumulation of substrate, and is not using that for medical condition, which is a completely different matter, then there is something not quite right. That, you know, it's not. There is something metabolically. There is the liver is starting to spit out ketones.
Yes,
and the body's not using it.
People think that having higher ketones is better because they think that's how you burn fat. But more so the idea or the model we have in mind is more like it's your gas gauge, like if you were a car. So it just tells you how much gasoline, let's say, you have at any given time, right?
Yeah.
So basically what you said, like having it full all the time just means that you're not really using it. So there's going to be
precisely
wrong in there. Unless you, like you said, you probably did a strenuous exercise where you burn fat and you produce ketones, or you just ate a fatty meal and probably you're burning a little bit more, or you used exogenous ketones, right? But for
that's such a great point. And sorry to interrupt, good man. I was just thinking that if I go for a fasted ride and I'm trying to perhaps push a little bit of the distance and I'm starting to struggle, this is when I would want to have ketones, exogenous ketones, which I really rarely do. If I'm trying to prepare for a sparring session in my sport, then I would not use ketones. I would want to use glucose. Well, glucose. Maltodextrin.
Explosiveness.
Yeah, right? Maltodextrin to fructose 2-to-1 and etc. And unless I'm specifically training my body to do this high intensity session fasted, to try to train it to become more and more efficient. But would I want to do a competition or a British Championship on that? No way. Because when I get, you know, Big Steve coming towards it, or Big Martin coming towards me, trying to, you know, be the heck out of me, then I want to be responsive as much as I possibly can. So people can use ketones and glucose very efficiently, and it's not that they're banned from the keto world. They just need to refine it to what is their sport. This is what we have found. Now, interestingly, gym work and pure strength work seems to define in both.
Yeah, but basically what we do, or basically what I've experimented with for a long while, and we do with some of our clients, is we mostly do bodybuilding for body recomposition with some powerlifting centric movements. So we do require a little bit of explosiveness, but we're really not on contest. We really don't care if you do it fast, or we just want you to push your body. So basically, on some advanced clients that are already insulin sensitive, that have been doing the diet for a long time, that are not very overweight, but more so now near a good body fat percentage.
Yeah.
We introduce a little bit of carbs
Yeah.
pre or peri-training, 5-10 grams, not much, in the form of glucose, and it works incredibly well for fatigue perception, as well as basically the idea is what we do is, as you know, people think that insulin is anabolic, and the reality is that it is not. It's more so anti-catabolic. So because you're training to build muscle and you have a little bit of insulin around training via the carbs, and probably maybe it can happen as well with some protein shake,
right?
The insulin will protect the actual muscle breakdown to a point. So in the end, the net effect or the net muscle protein synthesis would be a little bit higher than if you had not ingested those carbs. And again, you would probably be able to do 2 reps more. That over time, you know, it all adds up.
Yeah, precisely. This is you just described exactly what also we have observed in our. Some of them that were very empirical experiments, but some others were a little bit more quantifiable and controlled. But I think depending upon the type of sport and the substrate, unfortunately, we are the opposite as you guys. So we don't have lots of, let's say, physique remodeling and bodybuilding. We're more in either high volume, low, medium, or intermittent intensity, or type of sport which are more HIT. But interestingly, your experience seems to add to what we had in a very predictable manner. So I don't think anything is as linear as people sometimes make it, but it's interesting every now and again how small amount of carbohydrates, quoting some of the people, it's just like rocket fuel.
Yes.
It's just, and I've experienced that quite a few times. And what was interesting is that in a few of them, we were little tinkers, and we actually used a flavoring rather than just the carbohydrate, and was completely calorie less or energetic value less. So we use water, no energetic value, but flavored. So they thought was actually carbohydrate. And the other one was just, the usual carbohydrate drink in an isotonic type of drink. And it was so cut and clear how the people that had the dummy drink, so the one, the flavor that they thought was carbohydrate wasn't. So some of them might have been well affected by placebo, which is fantastic, is good for them. That means that the self-perception was overcome by what they could do, whereas some others stayed exactly the same, and they were really, really, really fatigued. So this was so interesting because the deviation from the mean were really, really big, meaning either they were feeling not changes and keep going down the drain with their energy level, or they felt, oh yeah, as soon as I drank it, few minutes later, I was okay. So one clearly needed carbs, one of these groups of the dummy, and the others actually was pure placebo.
Yes.
So this is what is interesting. In certain sports, I don't think there is so much application of that. We'd like to get into the competition realm where we already know the reactions that the athlete might have into, of a certain food substrate. So a feeling of safety can also work as a positive placebo effect, because they have that safety that they know that they perform at their best with that setup. That setup is invaluable for them. So, but yeah, we found things exceptionally similar as you guys have.
Awesome. Yeah, it's super interesting. And again, it's just, I see it as basically new and virgin territory yet, because we already know so much about, sports performance, but this is a very noble concept that people have been, reluctant, especially scientists, to really study. And these years have been incredibly in the sense that so many new research is coming and people like you actually trying to understand novel ideas and how to apply them, right? So Alessandro, thank you so much for the interview. It has been basically, for me, very enlightening, and I think it will be the same for our audience. So where can people find more about your research?
I keep a couple of our papers will be soon published, so I'll keep people updated into like social media. I'll make sure that you guys get copy of it and etc. So you can, with copyrights, but you can distribute it because I'm not alone on that, obviously. And I was very, very lucky to be part of that project. But if people Google my full name, so Alessandro Ferretti .co.uk, there is like a video section where I keep posting videos or writing. I haven't been writing for a while, but on what are the things that we are up to. Some of them are very empirical, but I will say so during that. So this is the idea we are developing, kind of thing. Whereas some others, I just present part of the research that we have done and accomplished in a more controlled manner. So this is alessandroferretti.co.uk, and obviously on Facebook as my full name, as social media.
Perfect. So thank you again so much, Alessandro. So this is Luis from Ketogains. We had Alessandro Ferretti, and thank you guys for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Ciao. Bye-bye.